Hello and welcome to Debating Europe's live stream event on automation, artificial intelligence and jobs here in the European Parliament in Brussels. My name is Joe Lidobarski. I'm the editor of Debating Europe, and joining me here today we have a panel of esteemed experts to talk about AI and the future of work. So to my left is Mady who is a member of the European Parliament from Luxembourg and Vice Chair of the Legal Affairs Committee. Next to her is Brittin, who is President of EMEA Business and Operations at Google. And then to my right, we have Erik Sandström, who is Chief Digital Officer at the Swedish Public Employment Service. And next to him is Olivia Chapman, who is a Policy Manager at Nesta, which is a global innovation foundation based in the UK. So they're going to be responding to questions that you've sent us on debatingeurope.eu, looking at how AI is going to affect work going into the future. And we're going to start off with a question that was sent in from Merck, who asks, will automation put an end to work? And if so, will we need a universal basic income? So Erik, I'd like to start with you on that. That's two questions really. First of all, will automation put an end to work? And then secondly, what do we do about that? Do we need some kind of guaranteed government payment, like a universal basic income? What would you say to Merck?
I would say that I don't think it will put an end to work. I think we always will have some work to do. Somebody's going to build and program those robots. And if that would happen, it will take a long, long time. But we are facing a skills gap. So for some individuals, the automation and digitalization may interfere with their careers. So something has to be done.
Okay, so something needs to be done. Olivia, what do you think needs to be done?
Well, some of the most exciting innovations are happening and are fueled by AI. I think where the gap is a lot of the stuff that's being reported on is things, that you see in the movies, which are quite a few years away from where we are right now. Some of the most crucial things that are increasing jobs and productivity are actually kind of in the back office and, sorting out payrolls and systems and sending you your tax bill, which are really important and really crucial. I definitely don't think AI is going to destroy jobs, not at all. We believe, and I believe really strongly, that there's huge possibilities created because of AI.
And Mady, would you agree?
I would agree that it will not be the end of the jobs, but I believe that artificial intelligence will impact all professions, every profession, not only high or middle skilled or low skilled, but so the problem is how can we skill and reskill people to be fit for the interaction with artificial intelligence. And there are many initiatives, but sometimes, that depends on the days, but sometimes I'm also somehow pessimistic about very low-skilled people, because the difficulty is how can we train these people to remain part of the active life. And as a policymaker, my concern is, of course, to encourage innovation, but also how can we keep how can we guarantee a decent life to our people? And so that's why I believe we have to think on different alternatives. Well, I am too long, but nevertheless, I want to put on the table that also, if we want to skill and reskill, it will cost a lot of money. And so we have also to look at how can we finance our public service, the welfare state. These are all questions, I think, not to be too alarming, but nevertheless alerting that we have to discuss these issues and try to find new ways. And so to come to your second question, I don't know if basic income is the answer to all the problems, but at least we should look at the pros and cons, because we see now that the differences between the very well-off and the very poor are increasing, and this is not good for the social cohesion of our society and for quality of life. So innovation is not the only reason, but we have to look at both sides.
Okay, and Matt, just to sort of your take on the kind of big picture impact of AI on the job market.
Yeah, well, the question asked about automation, and my answer is that automation's already been here. It's been here. We all use dishwashers and washing machines and machinery in our jobs every day, and I think that what automation can do is going to increase. Artificial intelligence sounds like science fiction, but it's really just a smarter set of computing tools that allow us all to have better tools to do our day-to-day job. So I'm an optimist, as you might expect, about people using them. If you use any Google product today, you're using machine learning, language recognition, picture recognition technology. These are tools that are helping people in science and helping consumers every day. But I think to Mady's point, we do need to think about skills. There's a couple of things that are going on here. One is the pace of innovation is getting faster. And so what's the policy response to these things? I was saying earlier today, I graduated in 1989 from university, and Tim Berners-Lee invented the web in 1989. And now I spent the last 10 years at Google doing a job that exists entirely because of the web. So education needs to deliver people who can learn through their lives. And one of the things which we've done at Google is recognize the risk of a gap between the digital haves and have-nots. We launched some training 3 years ago to say anybody who wants basic digital skills that can help you build a website, use analytics, grow a business, come and work with us online and physically. And we've trained 3 million people. We are blown away by the demand there in Europe for these digital skills. And these people have gone on to start businesses, to grow businesses, to become entrepreneurs. And they're all ages. 45% female, which is quite different from those going into tech, usually about 25%. Average age over 40. So it suggests that people have an appetite for these skills, and it's for all of us, I think, to work together to innovate and try to ensure that people can participate in this big revolution in a way that's really positive.
And you, a couple of you have mentioned education and skills. We'll get to that, but at first I just want to raise a point that Mady made, and it came in from one of our users, Vicente. A lot of our readers are worried about the impact of automation and robotics, AI and so on welfare systems, on the kind of so-called European social model. And Vicente says, he asks, can Europe's welfare system survive automation? And I suppose if you're talking about there are jobs which exist now, which people didn't even conceive about 10 years ago, and of course it's kind of this pace of changes is accelerating. Is our social model going to be able to cope with people switching, not just switching jobs, but also potentially switching careers?
Yes.
I'll put it to Mady first. I want to know what you think.
I think we have to do everything in order that our social system can cope with it. And that's why I always strengthen the need of a debate, because we can say, of course, everything will be okay, because technology always changes professions and jobs. In the past and in the future, but well, I believe that we want to keep our social model. I think it's one of the big advantages to live in the European Union. Well, if we find the tools and the needs and if we agree on it, it's about policy making.
Yes.
So I think we have to.
Mady,
we have to.
You're as optimistic?
Well, I think policymakers have got a tough job to do, and I'm delighted to have the chance to work with them, because I think one thing I have to do is understand the technology. So people like Mady being curious about what it's going to bring is really important. I do think what you need to look for is will these technologies bring growth? Because if you generate growth, then you can do a lot with the proceeds of growth to fund welfare.
But you have to look at the distribution of growth.
Of course. And so I think what I'm optimistic about is that digital technology has the opportunity to bring along those who we would previously have said are less educated, less skilled people, because somebody who doesn't speak languages can now use a machine to translate their language, their own language into multiple other languages. So you can suddenly become an exporter. You can suddenly read newspapers from around the world. So as long as education delivers people with a basic level of sort of literacy and numeracy, but who are also equipped to learn. One of the most popular courses on Coursera, which is an online learning thing, is about how to learn. So I think if we have people who learn well to learn, then they can adapt and produce. The other thing, of course, that politicians have to deal with is the aging population. So my kids are likely to live to 95 or 100, and we want them to be economically productive for a much longer period. And so there's some big reforms needed regardless of technology, and hopefully technology can be an engine for positive in that reform. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to
Olivia.
chip in and say,
Yes.
I think the great thing about technology is it sort of democratizes invention and ideas. And at Nesta, we run a number of programs where we fund and help start up things like Share Lab, which is ideas from, it doesn't matter where you come from, you can be a researcher, you can be a business, a startup, an individual, and you pitch your ideas, and we've just selected a few, and they're dealing with sort of societal inequalities. So yes, there is a role for government to play to set up those structures and make sure that people are looked after, but where there's gaps, we're finding really innovative people coming through and sorting it out off their own back by starting up these great platforms or apps that are solving problems. For example, in the care system, where there's a long-running debate at the moment about care workers being underpaid, not making their jobs. There's Trust on Tap, which is this new startup, using a Google to connect care workers so they can deliver a better service. Another one which is slightly more extraordinary, but even so pretty cool, I think, is called a milk bank, and it runs on the same premise as a blood bank and provides women who have trouble breastfeeding with valuable milk. And they've used the technology and those networks to provide that service. So they're kind of going around these traditional structures which maybe aren't servicing the public so well, but technology enables those things to move quicker and service those people. So I think there's a lot of exciting things there, and coming from all sections of society, yes. Not just the old, the old sort of, big sort of incumbents.
Yes. I mean, I think, Erik, what people like Vicente are worried about is that the public policy response to automation, to AI, is going to be, we need to liberalize the labor market, we need to kind of compete, workers are going to have to compete with AI, essentially, and they're worried there'll be a race to the bottom in terms of protection and standards. Is that a concern that you shared?
No, I'm optimistic about this, and I think it's the same with the electricity or the industrialization and so on. We don't compete with the machines, but we compete with each other and utilized by the machines. So you can put it that way. I think the problem, the threat people are feeling, is about, they are the ones that haven't integrated digitization into their lifestyle. So they are not using social media, and they are not using all the services available. And therefore, I think the public sector has a responsibility to help them over the threshold to be more integrated, try this, because when they are inside of the digitization and use digital services, they can continue their lifelong learning for themselves. But if they stay outside, then they will see this as a threat.
Yes.
Because when you are inside, when you use these digital opportunities,
yes.
Then you can do a lot of things. You can use massive open online courses, for instance, or you can change career if you want to, just by using free of charge services on the web.
Yes.
But for those who isn't there, we need to...
But that's the question. Is it an option, or will they be forced to change career? That's the...
Actually, I think it will be as it has been earlier, but it happens much faster than before.
Yes.
So yes, many
it's a bit
people
like asking, should it be optional to be able to do a career that doesn't involve electricity?
Yes.
So, you could choose to do that if you want to.
Yes.
Most people would choose to use electricity because they know that what it does is it changes not jobs necessarily, but tasks within jobs. We had a really interesting presentation from McKinsey today, who've been doing a lot of work looking at what's changing, and they've done a great and very erudite report suggesting that what's going to happen is that tasks within jobs will change. Just like, having a dishwasher means I can spend more time playing with my children rather than 2 hours a day washing the dishes. And I think that that's more likely to be the change. So they predicted that by 2030, 90% of jobs would require some kind of digital skills. I can believe that, just like probably 90% of jobs use electricity today. But that mostly those jobs are not going to go away. They're going to be changing the mix of tasks towards things that only humans can do, more creative things, more interpersonal
nevertheless,
things.
the condition is that people can trust the services. If you are obliged to use them, then of course we have to make sure that standards and safety are good enough. Because with electricity, you don't want to be killed by electricity.
Yeah, but these
and
digital
the same is about the use of these new services.
Yeah.
And that
I think here that the public sector needs to take more responsibility for instance, how we use these services and how we can trust them.
Standards we need and what is the framework.
And I think, the EU is to be congratulated on things like GDPR, which are about saying we need consumers to understand and be protected in how their data is used. Now, how that gets implemented initially, I'm sure will be a little bit clunky as we find our way together, but the intent is a really good one. And I think that's something where our political leaders have a real opportunity to shape the future for good, so that you have competition for services. You can make choices about how you use your data. You can make choices about these services you use. And choice drives competition, which drives innovation, which means that there'll be more services available, just as you were talking about. It's amazing to see what people are doing with technology that we produce in ways none of us would have predicted.
I want to, Matt, quickly pick up on, so all of you, I think, have mentioned digital skills, lifelong learning, and so on. This is exactly the topic of the next question, which was sent in from Esther, who asks, do we need a completely different model for education in Europe, one that prioritizes cradle-to-grave lifelong learning? Presumably, you'd support that?
I mean, I think there's a question as to how much does the state need to provide in education. And, I've got 2 teenage children. They're being taught pretty much the same content in pretty much the same way as I was and my parents were. I'm not sure that that's good. But I do think that they need to have, a basic set of context and literacy and numeracy and so on. I think they also need to learn to be curious. I think they need to learn to be creative. I think they need to learn to be collaborative. And they also need to learn to draw their own critical thinking across what information is provided to them. I think we know this at Google, right? When you ask us a question, we give you 10 links to different answers, and you go and look critically at what's out there. So I do think there's a set of skills that enable lifelong learning. I'm not sure that the state should be providing learning for everybody down the line. And we can see already with MOOCs, with YouTube, you can learn how to play any musical instrument from other people like you around the world. You don't need government to provide guitar lessons. And I think that's a settlement society will have to make.
Mady, please, what were you going to say? Because I'll feed you the next question from Ham, who says, on this, education is expensive. If workers have to upskill throughout their careers, won't that privilege the wealthy? So if the state isn't providing education to everybody, are they paying for themselves, getting into massive public debt?
I would like to make two points. The first one is that to be able to profit from the existing offer, you need a relatively good initial training. Initial education, because we see that lifelong learning offers are taken by the most educated people. And so I believe the state has the responsibility to provide a good start. And then I think we need, of course, an offer of lifelong learning it is not for free. I'm afraid that someone has to pay for it.
I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure that's true. I mean,
yes, but you pay always with something.
Olivia, what would you say?
I'm not sure that's true.
Matt, do you want to?
Well, I was just going to say, when I look at YouTube every day, people are learning new things from people like them. I love playing football. I share my passion with you for free because I'm just passionate about it, just like volunteers in sports clubs and volunteers in teaching. So I don't think it's the case that we have to sort of necessarily pay either economically or in other ways for learning things, particularly things that people are passionate about. I mean, I'd love to hear what your views are.
I think it's also that the whole structure at the moment is driven by sort of accreditation and degrees and things like that. That's important, but at the moment, employees are recruiting on that basis, and yet there's a whole lot of kind of more fluid way of learning, from each other, from your colleagues, from going online, and those things are really, play an enormous role, in this kind of continuous and lifelong learning. Mady, you mentioned before about upskilling and reskilling programs, and we've just done a piece of research that looks at programs around the world. They vary from country to country. Singapore, the Singaporean government actually give their citizens the equivalent of something like €300 to go and spend on training, and they can spend it how they want. They've made lifelong learning and continuous learning central to their sort of policies and government and attitude. I think a lot of governments in Europe could learn a lot from that. I think Sweden's doing some good things, but there's always a lot more work to be done, isn't there, across Europe? So I think the more that Europeans are learning from each other and learning how you can sort of be more responsive.
No, I agree that we should look more at lifelong learning and give credits to people who have a less good start into their lifelong learning.
But I think we have, because I think it exists some areas where someone has to pay for the education or the training, and I think we have in Sweden we see a problem. We have been quite good at upskilling people during the years, but the last years we see that the money invested in upskilling is decreasing according to previous years, and I think it has to do with think about you being an owner of a company and you have to do a decision about investing in machines which you can take the cost for like 5 or 7 years, or invest in human resources and people. Then you have to take all the cost the first year, and the investment might walk out the door the next day.
Yes.
This is a problem for us, and I think we might need. We might change this in regulations or policy making, so it's easier and cheaper for companies to take this cost and investment, of course.
But now you talk about companies who invest in their people, but with the mobility, and we encourage mobility, that you change career, then of course it's no longer for a company to provide only the company to provide lifelong learning to their employees, but we should also open these possibilities to self-employed, to independent, and this is a big challenge. Because very frequently they are out of all these official places.
I don't mean that's the whole story, but I think a very important role is this for companies to give this benefit, you can call it, and it doesn't have to be a paid education. It can be training on your ordinary work time.
You need time also.
Yeah,
because so this would be one.
This is where I think there needs to be some sort of consideration to allowing employees to take time off. Because it's a small investment now to ensure that the labour market is going to be a good and fulfilled one. In the very near future.
I believe that automation could allow for humans to work a bit less and have more time for training and reskilling.
Is there a concern? Does anybody on the panel have a concern that when we talk about the opportunities that AI and automation can offer, and definitely sort of it can potentially create sort of all sorts of new positions and jobs that we're not even thinking of now. But is there a concern that it's not like for like? It is they are getting more and more highly skilled, these positions which are being created, and potentially not everybody can kind of be a software engineer. Not everybody may be able to upskill, so we may leave people behind.
And you probably don't want everyone to be a software engineer,
I mean, I have a point of view here, which is AI in particular, machine learning, builds smarter tools for everyone that allow people to spend more time doing the stuff that only humans can do. I'll give you an example. Working with ophthalmologists, people who look at your eyes, machine learning can look at more scans of eyes than any human surgeon could do. As a result of that, our team at DeepMind were able to identify more clearly earlier signs of problems in eyes, which meant that the humans could see more patients, give them more accurate early diagnoses, and then treat them better. And I think that's a good example of a way in which technology is allowing the combination of people and technology to do better work and have a bigger impact. But it doesn't take away the need for humans at all. What it does is it supplements our ability to be productive, better outcomes earlier and more people. And I think that's the example of how this story is likely to unfold.
There's also examples where AI has been assisting in risk assessments, like firefighters going into buildings, which we didn't have in Grenfell, unfortunately. But those kind of situations, we're running a Flying High project at the moment, which is looking at how drones can help cities be smarter and more effective, and a lot of that's all driven by AI. And some of it sounds like it's crazy stuff, but a lot of it's just every day helping humans do their jobs better and more efficiently and with less risk.
And you are working with upskilling and reskilling workers, and so I just wanted to ask, is that something that you're worried about, sort of leaving behind? Can everyone be upskilled or reskilled, or is there a risk of leaving people behind?
No, absolutely. We strongly believe that everyone can. And you're right, Mady, there are definitely two sort of, different groups. We are looking at people in work who are have come through the education system and are willing to learn and do jobs. And that group need the incentives and the backing from their businesses and the excitement and inspiration to go on and keep learning and be curious and learn new things. And there's definitely a group that need help with their basic digital skills. But amazingly, the research we've done is that there needs to be a lot more done overall with everyone's kind of upskilling. But again, there's some great programs going on around the world. There's one called Social Builder in France, which is helping women and people from underprivileged backgrounds do very short courses. Again, common sense, short courses, 4 months, helps work around their family commitments. And they're able to get a sort of certification at the end of that, and it's just there's lots of good examples like that.
I think the technology can help avoid people getting left behind. Just briefly, I was in the Middle East last week. It's a part of the world where economic participation of women is lower than anywhere else. But what you're actually seeing is technology is allowing women to start to be more productive. And I think when we did our digital skills training in Europe, I mentioned 45% female. Quite a lot of those women were coming back into the labour market after having families, and technology was allowing them to ramp up their level of involvement and to be much more flexible with when, how and where that they work. And I think we'll see examples of this. It's important for us as a society, I think, to look out for where people might get left behind. And I think we're absolutely right to be worried on that. Where are the gaps where politics and leadership and focus, such as you're both advocating, can make a difference? But I really see that there is a hunger for this stuff. There's a demand for this stuff at all levels, and I think that's encouraging.
Eric?
Yeah, I think any of us is talking about everyone being a programmer. Lucky if you want to do this because we will have a labor shortage in that area. But it's really important because I think everyone needs some basic digital skills. And the problem is that we don't have we don't have structures for that because this is new for us, and it will be relevant for about maybe 10 years or so. The next generation will have no problems. They are digital natives. But 10, maybe 15 years, it will be a problem. We need to face that in some way. And I will just share an example of how we can do that, because the Swedish Public Employment Service and Google together launched for about half a year ago. We launched a online training in basic digital skills called Digital Me for everyone who wants to develop their basic digital skills, and more of that, I think, and more systemized in Europe.
And the offer has to be flexible because it has to adapt to different populations. And so we have to forget about the idea that it has to be a long courses, long years of studies, because it's better to go back more frequently to school or to any training than to have a long period. And then we have to change our minds, because our initial, at least in many European countries, the initial training is very long, initial education, and then you have a certificate, you are you are good for life. And so in many structures also of remuneration, you have still this idea that it is the initial diploma that gives you a high revenue, but this has to be changed, I believe.
Okay, well, I mean, there's much more we could debate. That's all we've got time for now, so we're going to have to call it there. But we will continue the debate on our website, debatingeurope.eu, and you can leave us comments, and then we will put those comments to policymakers and experts from across Europe. Thank you once again to our panelists for taking part, and thank you for watching.